Welcome to The Planted Runner. I'm Coach Claire Bartholic, and this is the PR Training Lab. This is my series of episodes that take you behind the scenes so you can see my process of what I do to create custom training plans for athletes of all ages, all abilities, and distances. So last week, I introduced you to Peachy. She's a 54-year-old runner who is training for a half marathon, and I did a run walk program for her. Today, we're going to do something very different. We are also going to be doing a half marathon, but this is for Josh, a 32-year-old runner who is really fast. So let's see how this will be different. If you would like me to create a custom training plan just for you here live, recorded live on the Planted Runner podcast, all you have to do is go to theplantedrunner.com/PR lab and you can enter to win. And if you like this style of episode, if you want me to do more of these, go ahead and write an Apple Podcast review. That's the best way to let me know that this is for you. You can also put a comment on Spotify if you listen over there. All right, let's get into Josh's training plan. So Josh filled out my PR Training Lab athlete survey, and he is 32 years old. So in the running world, that is just a baby. We've got lots of time left to develop some serious speed. So he is training for an October half marathon, and it is the nationwide Columbus half marathon. His goal time is super speedy, 1 hour and 30 minutes. So at this time, I'm wondering when I'm reading through this, okay, that is a big, ambitious goal. Is it going to be realistic? I don't know yet. Let's find out. How long has Josh been running regularly? 2 years. Okay. That is substantial. 2 years is great. If you've been running regularly, you're into the scene. That's plenty enough time to have some miles in your legs. And it's also early enough in the journey that it's easier to get PRs or personal records when you up your training or you start doing something different. The longer you have been training, the more adapted you are. So it means that it's usually harder to get huge jumps in your personal records. So when I see someone who has been a serious runner for a couple of years, that is great because there is tons of potential. Obviously, with Josh's age being 32, he is nowhere near his biological peak. Now, obviously, biological peak is important. An 80-year-old is never going to run as fast as a well-trained 32-year-old, right? But it really more matters how long you've been training at a high level. So if you are, let's say, a 60-year-old runner and you have been seriously training for 2 years, you have a whole lot of potential too, not just a 30-year-old who's been training for 2 years. So it really depends where you are on your fitness journey more than age, how much you can improve. There is a ceiling, of course, and everybody's ceiling is going to be different. Yes, as we get older, everything gets harder. But if we are talking about improvement, we've still got a lot to go. So I'm excited to see how this turns out for Josh. All right, he is using miles. So we're going to talk mostly in miles today. Obviously, I'm American. That is the language that I normally speak, but I can do some kilometer translations for you. I'll try to be doing both miles and kilometers on these episodes. So hopefully you can understand at least the gist of what I'm talking about if you're in metric. Next, I ask about any injuries because that is going to determine how intense I'm going to write this plan. If there's a serious injury or a recurring injury, I definitely want to know that. He wrote down tight hamstrings. Okay, in my book, that's not an injury. Tight hamstrings is it's kind of an interesting turn of phrase. It's very common. A lot of people who are runners, they describe muscle soreness as tightness. And the reason we do that is because it feels like we need to stretch. It feels like we have a shortened range of motion. When in fact, most of the time, if you're feeling a sense of tightness, it's actually just your body's way of saying, hey, I'm sore right now. It has nothing to do with a loss of flexibility. It just means that you're probably overdoing it a little bit, not getting the recovery, something like that. So, with hamstring injuries, so again, the feeling of a tight hamstring, definitely not an injury. But if he's concerned about his hamstrings, what we're going to watch out for in that case is high speed and hills. Because in both of those situations, we are putting a lot of stress on the hamstrings. And if you are susceptible to an injury, those are the things that can cause it. Now, I wouldn't say don't do hills or don't do 200-meter repeats. Those are important. But if for some reason your hamstrings are compromised in some way, or you feel that they are a weak point, those are the things that might cause an injury if you just go out super fast. So I would say be cautious, but don't be afraid. Okay. So that is an interesting point about the hamstrings. Hopefully, it never turns into any kind of injury. But if he does a nice warm up, especially on days he's doing hills or high end speed, that can help to lessen the risk. All right. What is your recent race times and distances? What are your recent race times? He wrote down that he has done a 5K recently in 19 minutes, 45 seconds. So that is good news for the 130 half marathon goal. I plugged that into a race equivalency calculator. I like the one from Luke Humphrey, so you can look that up if you want to play around with that. And a 1945 5K roughly translates to a little over a 130 half marathon. Now, these are not really well named, these calculators. It makes you feel like it is gospel. You put in this time and it spits out that time and you're good to go. It's more like an estimator. So it says, okay, if you could run this pace for this distance, you should be able to run this pace for a different distance, provided that you're just as well trained and ready and tapered and you have strategy and you're fueling and everything else. You should be able to run this time for a different distance. Now, what I use it for is to see if we're in the ballpark. Because if he had run, let's say, a 29-minute 5K, I would say the 130 half marathon is probably something we need to think about, maybe something in the distant future. But this tells me he's on track, he's in the ballpark. Now, what happens a lot is with people who are really good at the 5K, if they have not built up the endurance for the longer distances, that 5K time won't translate. So when you're a newer runner, it makes sense that you're better at the shorter distances because you just haven't had enough time to build up the aerobic capacity, the stamina to do the longer distances. You don't have the experience with fueling and pacing and strategy that you need in the half marathon and the marathon. So it is entirely possible that Josh is really good or very good at the 5K right now, and that might not translate over to the half marathon. Now, it also matters what the course is like. Columbus, Ohio probably is going to have some hills, but I wouldn't say it's going to be super hilly. I have not looked up the race course, so I don't know. So that's going to be a factor too. So if we assume that he has run a perfectly flat 5K in 1945, is he going to run a 130 on a hilly course? Obviously, don't know. And of course, We don't know the weather, but he's definitely in the ballpark. His goal is definitely realistic, provided that he trains well and builds up his endurance. All right, let's see what Josh is running. How many miles does he run per week? 25 to 30 miles a week. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I love seeing that kind of volume for a half marathoner. If he was running or training to run the marathon, I would say I'd love to see that at least at 35 miles, especially at his speed. Because remember, faster runners obviously cover more distance in shorter time. So 30 miles for Josh is not going to take as long as, let's say, a 4 hour marathoner, 5 hour marathoner. He is not out there for quite as long because he is running faster. So that could mean that he could increase his volume. It could mean because of his age, he can increase his volume. It could mean that because of his experience, he's relatively fresh. Could he increase his volume? Now, I'm not saying he has to. 30 miles per week is pretty solid for a half marathoner, but he's trying to do something pretty fast. So if it is well within his ability, no, he probably doesn't need to change that much. But if it's really kind of a stretch, I would say we've got to bump up somewhere. And the first place that I look is mileage. And usually that's done through frequency. So we'll figure out that in just a bit when we look at his days per week. What is the highest amount of weekly mileage you've ever run, and how long ago was that? Josh put 40 to 50 miles a year and a half ago. Okay, so that's kind of curious. If he started running just 2 years ago and he got up to 50 miles per week in 6 months, that is a big jump to go from 0 to 50 miles per week in 6 months. Now, my question earlier was, how long have you been running regularly? Let's say he had been running here and there and it wasn't consistent. Let's say he's coming from, triathlons. He's a big cyclist. He could possibly already have a big aerobic engine from a different sport. So the progression can be a little faster when you do it that way. Again, I've said this before. If you are a cyclist and you are coming to running, you do have a big aerobic engine, but you haven't built up the muscle endurance of running. You haven't subjected your legs to the pounding. You're not going to have quite as much durability in your bones, muscles, and tendons to handle ramping up super fast. But again, he said no injuries and he has a history of 40 to 50 miles a week. So I would say I'm relatively comfortable bumping him up if he's interested in running a little bit more. Running more often and running a few more miles is usually the best way to get better at running. Of course, there's a limit. Of course, you want to do this gradually. Of course, it's important that you take your time with bumping up frequency and distance. But if we can do it safely and gradually, it is usually the secret sauce. It is usually better than adding intensity. It is usually what we want to do to become better at running. Because not only are we practicing running, we're practicing good form more often. Again, we're building up that big aerobic engine. We are getting our muscles, joints, and tendons nice and tough to handle long distance running. All right, what days of the week do you currently run? Josh runs Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Okay, so 4 days a week. Spread out over 30 miles, 25 to 30 miles. That is just fine. That is very solid. He could stay right here, but we will probably want to push him a little bit. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. What day of the week would you like to do your long run? He wants to do that on Saturday. Okay, Saturday, perfect day for a long run. But remember, he's not running on Friday. So for the half marathon and the marathon, I like my runners to run the day before the long run. This simulates a longer long run because you're running long on tired legs. Now, you can run long on tired legs in other ways. Maybe he bikes on Fridays, maybe he lifts on Fridays. There could be some other ways to have tired legs. But the best way to have tired legs for your long run is being specific to our goal, which means running. So I'd love to see him run the day before the long run. But again, doesn't have to be. I don't think it's quite as critical for the half marathon as it is the full, but I'd still like to see him running the day before. So let's see what he's doing. Okay, how long is the average most recent long run? 8.5 miles is what he has run recently. Okay, we are in June. His race is in October. So running 8 to 10 miles right now, absolutely perfect. He does not need to go much higher than this. What I'm probably going to do for Josh's long run is I would like to see him get pretty long on the long run. So definitely 14 miles, which is over distance. That is more than 13.1 miles, which is the half marathon distance. Kilometers, that is 21 kilometers. So I would love to see him getting up to probably 16 miles for his long run. Maybe 14, we'll see. But when you go over distance, when you are as fast as Josh and when you have good leg durability, you can handle the rigors of the race a little better. Now, we don't want to do that with the marathon. We're not going to run 26 miles or 42 kilometers in marathon training to prepare for the marathon. But for the half, we can, because Josh can run less than 3 hours, 16 miles at his pace, right? So he is not doing this super long run that's going to take him a long time to recover from. He will be able to cover 16 miles in less than 3 hours and probably significantly less. So I would go ahead and give him that longer distance long run. I would not do this for a runner that would take longer than 3 hours to cover the distance. And I would not do this for a really new runner who hasn't built up the capacity for that kind of long run. So for most people, if you are absolute beginner and you're just working up and 13.1 miles is going to be your longest run ever in your life, I probably wouldn't even get up to it. Maybe, you can train for a half marathon with just a 12-mile long run. But for someone like Josh, who is young, fit, and fast, we definitely want to go over distance. All right, what pace would you say is a very easy effort, a relaxed pace for an average run? This is a pace so slow that you could talk the entire time almost as easily as walking. He put 8:30 per mile. So that is probably okay for most of his runs. I would still love to see that slower. I would say, Josh, keep it to 9 minutes and up. Keep it at a nice, slow pace so that it is almost annoying, right? We don't want to compromise form. So, what you do to run slower than what you're comfortable is keep that good form. You just shorten up your stride. Nothing changes in your running form except for your stride. So you're still taking light, quick, fast steps, but you're just not extending as long. So what this does is it makes everything easier. Your impact forces on the ground are easier. Your breathing rate is easier. Your heart doesn't have to work as hard. Everything becomes easier. So you truly can get recovery and you truly can build that aerobic engine. So 8:30, yes, I would probably agree with you, Josh. I'm sure you could run that just fine and talk the whole time. I would challenge you to try to go even slower. What day of the week do you prefer to run your speed days? Mondays and Thursdays. Okay, so remember he is running long on Saturday. That gives him a day of rest and recovery in between on Sunday before he runs speed on Monday. That's perfectly fine. And then Thursday, he's running fast again. So what I would rather see is I'd rather see him switch Wednesday and Thursday. So a perfect schedule, a 4-day schedule with a long run on Saturday would be run speed Monday, run speed Wednesday, take Thursday off, run Friday, and run long Saturday. So we'll see if we can switch him up a little bit to that. If not, it's not the end of the world, but I think for ideal training, we'd want to spread that out just a little bit better. Which day of the week does Josh rest? Does he take a full rest day with no running, no cross training? He says Sunday, but he also wrote, I generally do not take full rest days unless I really need to. Okay, so rest days. Do you need a rest day? In my opinion, yes. But I also don't mean a rest day is completely on the couch watching Netflix, right? A rest day could be lightly moving. It could be maybe doing some gardening, going on walks. It could be doing mobility. I don't mean complete catatonic rest, but no scheduled exercise can really be great for your brain, and it can be great, obviously, for you physically. Now, you don't need to take it on some 7-day schedule. Like, our world works on a 7-day schedule. Doesn't mean your fitness has to do that, but it usually fits with our lives better. So if you don't need a full rest day, you are feeling fresh, your mood is great, you're not cranky, you're not feeling sore all the time, maybe you actually don't need a rest day. Or maybe it means you could be training a little harder or a little more often. So I would still give him a rest day, especially when we're just running 4 days a week, unless he's doing other kinds of cross training. So maybe he's swimming. He could do that on Sunday as his quote unquote rest days. We'll see what he is doing. All right. What are your non negotiables when it comes to training days? He says he's flexible. Fabulous. So we're going to do it my way. I'm just kidding. I mean, we're going to make it fit his schedule, but I'm definitely going to suggest we tweak those days just a little bit. So I did ask him if it was okay to run long Saturday, speed days, Monday, Wednesday, and run on Friday, and he checked that box. So that's what we are going to give him. What are your favorite running workouts? He wrote 100 or 200 meter repeats. Okay, we've got a sprinter here. Again, maybe that's the reason for the tight hamstrings. 100-meter repeats, I would say, have limited use for endurance runners. They're still good. I'm not saying you shouldn't do them, but that would be more like a stride, something that you would be doing to practice your form. A 100-meter repeat is, you've seen it in the Olympics. They're down in the blocks. They're exploding up. We don't need to do anything in blocks. We don't need to touch the track with our hands as endurance runners. So it really kind of depends on what he's doing. Now, 200-meter repeats, which is halfway around the track, is something that I often schedule for endurance runners because it really is the high end of your speed, not quite touching aerobic capacity, but maybe a little bit, still is highly anaerobic, but you are really just reaching the edge of your speed capability. And when you do that, it can trickle down to all of your other paces. So 200-meter repeats you will see on your schedule. What are your least favorite kinds of running workouts? And Josh wrote mile repeats. Okay, with good reason. Mile repeats are tough. So it's a little over 4 times around a track, running almost as hard as you can, and then completely stopping, breathing, sometimes with your hands on your knees. You might take 2, 3, 4 minutes to get your breathing and your heart rate down, and then you do it again. It is a very intense, challenging workout if you do it right. I schedule mile repeats occasionally. It'll probably be only once per cycle because It is so much faster than what you are going to be running for the half marathon, 10K, 5K, all of that. It's good to kind of touch that speed for a little bit, but it's a very high intensity workout, and you can only do just a touch of that. So don't worry, Josh, I'm not going to give you too many mile repeats. What kinds of non running physical activities or cross training do you do each week, and when do you do them? Josh says, I weightlift Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and play ultimate frisbee Tuesday and Thursday. Okay, so let's talk about how we put strength training and running together when we are endurance runners. So we're still a ways away from his goal race. So I would say that there's nothing technically wrong with what he's doing, especially if he is not too sore to run well. But the goal with our training is to have the hard days hard and then the easy days truly easy for recovery. So if he is running the same days as he is weightlifting, which he's doing that on Monday and Wednesday, so that's good. And then he on Friday he's lifting, and then he has his long run the next day. So technically he's pre-fatiguing his legs for his long run, so we can kind of get away with some of that. But I would say if he could possibly switch that Friday to his Saturday and lift weights after his long run. Now, a lot of people think, oh my God, that sounds terrible. How can I go out and run for 2 hours and then, lift for an hour? Well, first of all, you don't have to lift for an hour. You can do 20 minutes. But the beautiful part of lifting after your long run, and it could be immediately after, get a snack first and get some water, or it could be in the afternoon when you ran in the morning. The beautiful thing about doing that is your legs are tired from the long run, and then you are lifting weights. And what that does, you're lifting on tired legs. Obviously, you won't be able to lift as much as you could on fresh legs. But what we're doing is really making durable legs. We are teaching our legs what it's like to work out when we're tired. You will need that skill in any kind of long distance running. And so we're really kind of beating ourselves up all on one day. And then the next day is rest or easy running. We're not continuously beating ourselves up, tearing down those muscles. We're taking time to rest and recover. So that is a small nuance. And if it doesn't fit his schedule, I would say we want to kind of switch that around a little bit so that he's not lifting the day before his long run. I'd rather see a run. Okay, now he's also playing ultimate frisbee on Tuesday and Thursday. So that's obviously a group event. It's fun. I'm sure he loves it. There's going to be a little bit of sprinting in there. There's going to be a little bit of jogging in there. I would say that there's nothing really wrong with that, especially at this stage. His goal is very close to his current fitness, assuming that he trains well enough to get to the endurance capabilities you'd need for the half marathon. So I would say let's not change that too much. You might want to cut that back when we get closer to the race, just to make sure that you're hitting your times for your running and that you are really getting in the recovery. But, Ultimate Frisbee is a social event. There's a lot of benefits of exercising with others. So I'd say keep that in as long as you can, but maybe towards the end of the summer, maybe in September before your race, you want to whittle that down so that you really can focus on being very specific to your race and getting the recovery that you need. What are your biggest struggles with nutrition? Hydration and eating enough. 3,000 plus calories. Okay, so this is an interesting one. I would say for hydration, I have struggled with this in the past too. I've called myself a camel. I joke that I don't even like water and I don't like water that much. So there are going to have to be some tips and tricks here to make you drink. Some people just aren't naturally thirsty. That doesn't mean that they're not becoming dehydrated. So I would say flavor your water, put something tasty in it. I use these things. They're called True Lime or True Lemon. They're sort of like Crystal Light, but they're natural and they flavor your water. So you can use something like that. You can put a little bit of juice in there. And speaking of, if he is having trouble eating enough calories, juice is definitely the way to go. Get some liquid calories in there because your brain doesn't register liquid calories very well. You know, we were evolved drinking water, not anything else. And so when you drink orange juice, your body thinks that you're drinking water. And so it doesn't tell you that you're full. Nobody gets full from drinking orange juice, right? So liquid calories, I think, are going to be the way to go. I don't know what Josh's calorie requirements are. I don't know how big he is. I don't know what his metabolism is like. But I will say that most runners, especially when they're really going for a high performance goal, don't eat enough. Now, this has nothing to do with whether you're overweight or not, or underweight or not. This has to do with fueling your body for your activity. So it's a myth that people who are overweight need to decrease their calories when training for a marathon so they can get thinner. That's a terrible idea. If you do want to change your body composition, it's best done in a non performance period when you're not trying to go for a performance goal. But that does not sound like that's the case with Josh. He's trying to eat enough. He's trying to eat 3,000 calories plus a day. So that to me tells me that he's very active beyond running and he needs to take a look at his nutrition. So there's lots of ways to add calories. Most runners need to focus on carbohydrates and protein. Usually the fat takes care of itself. But we're depleted usually in carbohydrates because we run a lot, and we get depleted in protein because we lift and we do muscle damage when we run. So those are the two things to really focus on. But if you are in a deficit at all, your body is going to throw muscle overboard. So, adding some fat can be a great way to bump the calories up so that your brain doesn't freak out and start eating the muscle that you're trying so hard to build. So, fat has more calories per gram than carbohydrates and fat, or carbohydrates and protein, sorry. And so that can be a good choice, adding in some nut butter, some avocado, some high calorie dense foods to your diet. What are your biggest struggles mentally when it comes to success and performance? He says maintaining energy for it all. So I don't know if he's talking about literal energy, like he is in a calorie deficit and he's tired all the time from the things that he is doing, or if he means energy more metaphorically, like keeping motivated for it. So, you know, there's lots of ways to keep we talked about the calorie part. If he's talking about motivation in general, I would say, motivation is something that I think is hard to try to teach people. In a lot of ways, you're either motivated or you're not. You want something or you don't. When you really, really want something, you don't have to worry about energy because you're focused on this thing that you want so bad. So if you only want something sort of half-heartedly, then of course you're not going to have the energy to do it. So motivation is a tricky one when it comes to, talking about how do I get motivated for something? And the answer is to do something you really want to do. So maybe he is struggling because some of these things that he's doing, maybe he doesn't quite want to do. Or maybe he really wants to focus on this half marathon, but he also feels committed to, let's say, the ultimate frisbee, which he's fallen out of love with. I don't know. I'm making up these stories, of course, but maintaining energy, number one, comes to being rested, recovered, eating well, sleeping well, lowering your stress. And I think tweaking some of the days that Josh exercises could help with that. And of course, eating more could help with that. But if it comes to motivation, I would say whittle down the things that aren't bringing you joy. Do a Marie Kondo of your exercise and see what you can trim out so that you have plenty of energy to do the things that you're really, really passionate about. What are you hoping to learn or gain in this training cycle? Josh wants a better understanding of how to optimize general health while getting faster. Okay, this is a great point that Josh brings up because there's lots of things that we can do to get faster that aren't so good for our general health. We could starve ourselves, right, to try to get as skinny as possible so we don't have to move as much mass every time we run. But that is highly risky and dangerous to our general health. So, we could overtrain and run way too much and lift way too much. And that in the short term could really boost our performance, but it's not sustainable. It's not something we can do long term. And eventually it will break us. So we don't want to do that. So, how do we optimize our general health while getting faster? So, general health has to do with a lot of things. It's our physical health, how we take care of our bodies, how we feed our bodies, how we treat our brains. Are we being social? Are we going out? Do we have a job that's fulfilling? Are we leading a life that we are proud of? All of those things lead to general health. And sometimes going after big goals, big running goals, can really optimize our health because it makes us feel like we're doing something important and worthwhile. That is a big, big thing when it comes to our general health. But I would say getting into good routines, good, healthy routines. So just like brushing your teeth is a good, healthy routine, exercising in the morning, getting up and taking care of yourself first before you start your day. All of these things are going to optimize general health. Eating a whole foods diet, whether you're 100% plant-based or not, as long as you are really focusing on getting a balance of whole foods as much as possible, but not being so intense about it that you're worried about perfection, which does not exist, getting your sleep, lowering your stress, all of these things usually come down to first educating yourself on how to do it and then figuring out ways to make these things habits so that they're not choices anymore, so that the healthy choice is the convenient choice and you do it automatically. Anything else you'd like to share that would be helpful to your success? I want to qualify for Boston and the local elite track club / break my 5K PR. So to qualify for Boston as a male in your 30s is a sub-3 marathon. So that is probably doable for Josh with a few years of good training. I think that he is definitely in the ballpark here. The 5K time of 19:45 roughly translates to a 3:09 marathon. So he is knocking on the door. I don't know if he's done a marathon before. The biggest thing to getting better at the marathon is actually running a marathon. Experience is the thing that is going to get you better at the marathon. So I think he definitely can do it within a couple years, assuming he stays healthy, assuming he takes care of himself, assuming he doesn't overtrain and get too excited. And I'm sure that he can break that 5K PR. So I would say, Josh, before you get into full on half marathon training, maybe go out and run a 5K this summer, see what you do, see how it feels. let's get into this half marathon phase and bust out a beautiful, fast half marathon PR. And then if there is a spring marathon that you've got your eye on, make sure it's flat and fast and sign up for that. And if you get a good day, we can chip away at that Boston qualifying time. But definitely realistic, definitely can happen with good training, taking care of yourself, and of course, as always, a little bit of luck. All right, that is Josh's PR training lab breakdown. I'm going to go ahead and put this together for him. This was a fun one. It's nice to do some contrast between some faster runners versus slower runners, younger runners, older runners, a big mix. I've done 2 half marathons in a row, so definitely going to pick either the marathon or the 5K, 10K for the next one. Going to throw a metric one in there. Hope everybody can understand the difference in distances too much because, I'm trying to do this without much editing. So I don't have, I can't always do the translation in my head super, super quick, but hopefully you get the point. And if you do like this style of podcast, if you are getting some value out of me making this style of bonus episodes, if you want me to make it a regular feature on the Planted Runner, the best way to let me know is write me an Apple Podcast review telling me what you think. You can also write on Spotify. There's a way to put comments there. So I'd really love to hear from you. These are also on YouTube. So that's another place to add your voice. Let me know what you're looking for. If you like it, if you don't, that's the best way to contact me. And again, if you would like to enter to win a free custom training plan created live on the Planted Runner podcast, go ahead and go to theplantedrunner.com/PR lab. That's it for me for today. Have a great run today.